All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over the slideshow presentations for Murachs, JavaScript, and jQuery 3rd edition as part of the AWD Application and Web Development 1000 Web Technologies class. I'm up to Chapter 12 of 18. As you can see, the chapter is entitled How to Use Ajax, JSON, and Flickr. We have 3 applied objectives and 6 knowledge objectives. Our applied objectives: use Ajax with XML, which is the extensible markup language, or JSON. And I should say Ajax is asynchronous JavaScript and XML. XML is the extensible markup language. JSON is JavaScript object notation. To update a web page without reloading it, also known as update in place. Number 2, use Ajax and JSON with the API for Flickr to get a feed for photos and display its data on your web pages. Number 3, use your browser to review the feed from a website to see what data items it returns. Our knowledge objectives: number 1, in general terms, describe the way Ajax works, including the use of the XMLHttpRequest object. Number 2, in general terms, distinguish between XML and JSON data. Number 3, distinguish between the following jQuery methods for making Ajax requests: load, $get, $post, $get JSON, and $Ajax. Describe JSON P and cross-domain security policies. In general terms, describe the way you use the API for a website to get data from the website and display it on your web pages. And number 6, in general terms, describe how reviewing the feed from a website can help you understand the data items in the feed. I will mention, as a little bit for lack of better words, of a disclaimer here, that I do not plan on covering this chapter in the regular classroom session. So far, we have gone through the first 11 chapters. Chapter 1, the Intro to Web Development. Chapter 2, Getting Started with JavaScript. Chapter 3, the Essential JavaScript Statements. Chapter 4, How to Work with JavaScript Objects, Functions, and Events. Chapter 5, How to Test and Debug a JavaScript Application. Chapter 6, How to Script the DOM with JavaScript. Chapter 7, How to Work with Links, Images, and Timers. That's Part 1, JavaScript Essentials. I plan on going over all 225 approximately pages of that. In Section 2, Chapter 6, Get Off to a Fast Start with jQuery. I'm sorry, that's Chapter 8, Get Off to a Fast Start with jQuery. Chapter 9, How to Use Effects and Animations. Chapter 10, How to Work with Forms and Data Validations. Chapter 11, How to Use the jQuery plugins and jQuery UI widgets. I plan on going over all of those chapters, so that's about pages 225 through about 333. Chapter 12, How to Use Ajax, JSON, and Flickr, I don't plan on covering with the class. And the last 6 chapters of the book, Chapter 13, How to Work with Numbers, Strings, and Dates. Chapter 14, How to Work with Control Structures, Exceptions, and Regular Expressions. I plan on covering both those chapters. Chapter 15 is How to Work with Browser Objects, Cookies, and Web Storage. If time, I'd like to cover that, but very quickly. Chapter 16, How to Work with Arrays, I do want to cover. And Chapters 17 and 18, How to Create and Use your own Java or your own objects. That's 17. And 18, How to Create and Use Closures, IEFEs, the module pattern and plugin. I'm only going to cover that chapter, so 17 and 18, I'm only going to cover by going over the PowerPoints. And 12 is one as well. So at a maximum, I'll cover 15 of the 18 chapters in class. All right, so I guess, I don't know if I said these or not. In general terms, describe how you use the API for a website to get data and display it on the web pages. In general terms, describe how reviewing the feed from a website can help you understand the data items in the feed. All right, Ajax is a partial page refresh. And typically the things that are used, there's a couple of them. One, as already mentioned here, is if I go into Google and I use Google Suggest. So I come in here and I type J. And notice it comes up and it finds a bunch of stuff based on what I've just typed in. But if I type in an A, it all changes. All right, and another A and a V, Now it thinks it's either Java or JavaScript. And it keeps changing based on my input. All right. Another couple ones to look at. You go to Google Maps. All right. And if I come in here and I say, I don't know, let's put in Rankin. So let's put in 755 Par Road, Wentzville, Missouri. There we are. The destination. Oh, what is the address of Rankin in St. Louis? I always forget. I know it's on Finney. There we go. All right, so I put that in and I click continue. I don't really want to add an extension, but that's fine. No, I don't want to do that. I wish I would not have clicked that, but I did. All right, the point is, when you go through here and you're going through Google Maps, as you zoom in and you zoom out, the map itself actually changes before your eyes. Not a great example because it looks like I need some plugins. Let's try this. I don't know if this has changed or not. Every time I look at it, it's a little different. All right. But if I go here, and these are, I went to Family Video. And if I take my mouse and I put it, again, this changes all the time. The way this used to be set up was if you took your mouse, let me just go to familyvideo.com, period. If you went to Family Video and you took your mouse and you put it over the stuff here, well, you can see how it is changing. But what used to happen when you did that is it would show on the screen a little narrative of what the movie was about. All right? I guess it's not doing that anymore. They've changed it around again. Okay, it always seems to change quite a bit. Now it's just drawing the box around it, which isn't showing you very much. All right, I should mention, as we get started, again, Ajax has been around for a while, but I'm going to type in here Jesse James Ajax. All right, and this article, which now it's pretty much a classic. It's about 13 years old. All right, it will be 13 years old in a couple of weeks. It's called Ajax, A New Approach to Web Applications. And what happened in that article is they explained how you can do what's called a partial page refresh by using an XML, an extensible markup language, HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol request object that Microsoft created a long time ago and never really did much of anything with. But people looked at it and said, hey, we can do this so that when we go in and we update a page, that rather than having it the whole page refresh, where you get what's called page flicker, you can have just the part of the page that you want to have refresh actually refresh. All right? So, Ajax lets you receive data from a web server without reloading the page, also referred to as a partial page refresh. To send an Ajax request, JavaScript uses a browser object known as an HTTP request or XHR object. So this is how a normal one is done. You look at the difference in here, and what's different is this is a typical HTTP request and response. This is an XML HTTP request. This object can include data that tells the application server what data is being requested. An XHR, all right, object is often processed by a programmer script on the application server. Then the JavaScript programmer must coordinate the requests with the application scripts. It's used all over the place today. And they mention, for instance, if you go out to try Facebook, and you comment on, a picture or something that somebody has placed out there, and you hit enter, it immediately refreshes the page to let you know that indeed that the update was made. The typical data formats that are used for this are HTML, hypertext markup language, so .html files, XML, extensible markup language, .xml files, and JSON, JavaScript object notation, all right, with an extension of .json. Now, XML is an open standard device-independent format that must be parsed by JavaScript or jQuery in the browser. And generally, it's more work than using JSON. JSON are more popular because they're smaller. JSON files are smaller and faster than XML files. They're easier to parse because the data is returned as JavaScript objects. Most server-side languages have methods that can be used to encode JSON also. If you want more information, you can go out to json.org. I'm not going to do that right now. There's some XML data. With XML, you make your own tags. So there's an opening and a closing tag, an opening and a closing, an opening and a closing, opening, closing, open, close, open, close, open, close, open, close, and open, close. All right. With JSON, again, it looks more JavaScript-ish, and because it is. Now, there's a table here on page 341, and it's also shown on the page here, that represents the members and the methods and the properties of the XML HTTP request object. Again, this object is behind every Ajax request, no matter whether you're using HTML, XML, or JSON. All right? The two methods that get used with every request are the open and the send. The open method is used to open a connection for a request. All right? This method specifies whether the request is a GET or a POST, and it provides the URL for the request. After the open is issued, the send method is used to send the request. If necessary, the method can include a data parameter that sends data to the server along with the request. Typically, you want to do that because you want to filter or have some control over how much data is returned. There's a ready state property that you can see right here, and that indicates the state of the request. There's a status and a status text property. They provide the status code and the message that's returned from the server. You know, things like if you've ever seen a 404 message, like for a page not found type of an idea. So the table that you see here shows the members, methods, properties, and events that can be used with the XML HTTP request object. All right. As far as how to actually use it, that's what's shown in the figure here. Okay. You can use the XML HTTP request object to get XML data from the web server without refreshing the web page. This example shows a portion of the XML file. However, you can assume that this file includes, a lot more information than what's shown there. All right. Now, there are code examples that are shown here. And what you'll notice when you start to look through the stuff that's actually shown here is the event handler for the onReady state change parses the data only if the ready state property is 4, all right, meaning it was successful, and the status property is 200, meaning, again, that it worked. There's some jQuery shorthand methods that you can use for working with Ajax, and they're shown here on page 344. All right? This figure summarizes the major jQuery methods used for working with Ajax. The load method is used to get HTML data. The get and post are commonly used with XML data, which is the default type for these methods. The get JSON is used to get JSON data. Then there's some examples that show how these work. This first example uses the load method to load the HTML from a file named solutions.html. The second example uses the get method to load the XML data, and the third uses the JSON method to load data. Again, jQuery uses several shorthand methods that allow you to request and receive the different types of data. All of these let you include data that will be used by the web server, so again, you can filter the results. The difference between the $.get and the $.post is the method used for the request. Do you want to do a get, which is basically read-only, where you put the stuff in the query string, or do you want to do a post, which is not read-only? It's used typically for more sensitive data, or if you're changing the data, and the data is not shown in the query string, rather it's buried, so to speak, in the HTTP header. Finally, that each method that's in there is an expanded form of the each method that can be used to process all of the items that are in a return list or whatever, and you're going to see that in just a minute. This figure here shows you how to use the load method, all right, to load HTML data with an Ajax request. And we can see how this works if we take a look at the jQuery. There are event handlers for the click events of the 3 links. In the load methods for these links, the URL not only consists of the name of the HTML file, but a reference to its section for that link. In other words, where to go for it. The benefit of using HTML data with Ajax requests is that the data is already within HTML elements, and it can be formatted by CSS. In other words, you don't have to parse the data that's returned by the request. In contrast to that, you do have to parse XML or JSON data for the system to be able to understand it. Now, the example that's here on pages 348 and 349 shows how to use the $get method to load XML data from a web server. All right, remember, post works the same way, except post is used to send a request rather than get. All right. I think I may have whizzed past there. There we go. That's the XML example. So you can use the jQuery find method in here to get the data in an XML file. All right, and I think it yet shows it here. The first find method shown here starts a chain that gets the children, which are the team members, of the management data that's returned. And the other 3 find methods get the name, title, and bio for each one. Then this is basically replicated using JSON. So to process the returned JSON data, you use nested each statements. The function in the first method processes each collection in the returned data. The function in the second each will process each item or team member in the collection. It'll have 2 parameters that represent the key and the value of the item. Then you can use object notation to get fields for the returned data. Starting on 352, the author talks about, this is a longer chapter than I thought. All right. The author talks about how to send data with an Ajax request. To do that, you use the data parameter of a shortcut method to supply either a string or a map that contains the data. In the first example that's shown here, it uses a string to send one name value pair that asks for a name. The second example uses a map that's coded with braces to send the same thing. So they're showing you 2 ways of doing the same thing. In some Ajax applications, forms are used to get the data that should be sent with a request. In that case, you can use the helper methods that are shown here. the serialize and the serialize array. All right. As you can probably tell listening to me, I have not used a boatload of this stuff, and I'm not going to try to put one past you and say that I have. All right, let me check my time here. I'm at 20 minutes, so even though it's a little early, I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to continue on with part 2 of this presentation in just a couple minutes.